Hi, this video is about metabolic health, and one of the reasons why I wanted to address this subject is that when we look at the diseases and disorders that are the most common and threatening to the public, your metabolic health is one of the most effective ways to assess your health and overall risk for cardiovascular disease. Now, studies have shown that metabolic health is a better predictor of heart disease than any one marker that your doctor may have brought to your attention. There was one study that was an observational analysis of more than 28,000 subjects were followed for 21 years. They found that the factors that best predicted the risk of heart disease were type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, obesity, and of course smoking. For more interesting studies and data, take a quick review of dietdoctor.com and read some of the research. I have no affiliation with them, but they have great reliable information. Now, going back to what I said before, you must really analyze your source of information, who funded it, who has something to gain, and if it's a randomized controlled trial. Now, metabolic syndrome itself is not a disease, but the term refers to a disproportionate number in a cluster of markers that together can determine your risk for heart disease. Hypertension, normally defined at 130/80 or more, which is high blood pressure, fasting glucose or insulin resistance, dyslipidemia, cholesterol and triglycerides, obesity and or waist to height ratio. Now, research has shown that only 12% of the US is metabolically healthy. 12%. This is a concerning issue. Now, consider some things here. We as humans have been around for a few 100,000 years. Only in the last century or two we've modified our diet and included things that were not originally meant to be consumed. And when your body senses something that's not meant to be there, homeostasis responds with inflammation. To our bodies, it's a foreign substance. I'm not talking about plastics or anything like that. I'm talking about sugar, processed foods, and even some fruits and vegetables, which we have been taught that are healthy. Now, everyone has different genetic makeups and different responses to different substances, but it's equally dangerous nonetheless. Now, what we consume today and what we give to our children will determine the health of generations to come. Therefore, I think it's something that we need to be conscious of. Now, as I mentioned, many things like fruits and vegetables are said to be healthy, and some are. But we need to understand our biology and physiology before we can just eat whatever's in front of us. Now, fruits can only be metabolized by the liver, so eating excess fruits will overload your liver, and the excess will be stored as fat. Now, we must also understand that we have been taught for generations that cholesterol is bad, and that LDL is bad cholesterol and whatnot. And we've all dealt with diabetes from an antiquated perspective, meaning that we measure sugar levels when what we should be paying attention to is insulin levels. When we discover that our sugar levels are disproportionate, it's already been 10 or 15 years too late. So how do we get a hold of our metabolic health? Let's go one at a time, and I'll be making videos about each one of these in detail, but we'll go over them briefly. Now, hypertension or high blood pressure is not an independent condition. It's a symptom of another condition. But high blood pressure can be defined as anything over 120/80. Now, 120 is the pressure of your blood mid-pump from the heart, systolic, as it's beating, and the 80 is the pressure at rest between pumps, which is diastolic. People have long villainized salt as a cause of high blood pressure, and if it's already high, it will elevate it. But for a normal, healthy person, we need salt in our diet. There are better quality salts than others, the better quality being sea salts or Himalayan salts. Now, fasting glucose has been thought to be a metabolic marker, but it's more to realize this by insulin levels, as if your fasting glucose is high, which probably means your insulin levels have been elevated for some time. But by definition, your standard fasting glucose level should be around 90 to 100. But like I mentioned in the past video, diabetes type 2 is also an epidemic all over the world due to our modern diet. Now, we're guiding our children down a road of metabolic syndrome. Schools and hospitals are using nutritional guidelines introduced in the 50s by a man with an agenda. We'll be in touch. We'll touch on that in another video. Fruits are not what you may believe that they are. As I mentioned before, they can only be metabolized by the liver. If you're eating fruits, the fiber may assist in limiting the absorption of fructose into the bloodstream. But if you're drinking any kind of juice, may the force be with you. We have different kinds of sugars that are undisputed as the enemy. Now, sucrose, a disaccharide that is half glucose and half fructose. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose and stored as glycogen in the liver. Now, we overconsume sugars and processed foods to the point of detriment. Now, dyslipidemia, or the disproportion of HDL, LDL, and triglycerides, is yet another misunderstood issue. They used to say eat low-fat foods, saturated fat causes heart disease, LDL is bad cholesterol, but these are just flat-out dangerous ideas. Now again, I will have a video on triglyceride and cholesterol soon, but for now, I'll touch a bit on what to pay attention to. Now triglyceride is a fat that's carried around in your blood, which gets transported via chylomicrons to fuel the cells of the body. And it is a major form of energy for your tissues. HDL and LDL are high-density lipoproteins and low-density lipoproteins, which are carriers for cholesterol. A ratio of triglycerides to high-density lipoproteins is thought to be a good indicator for the risk of heart disease. For example, if your triglycerides is 200 and your HDL, your high-density lipoproteins, is 100, your ratio will be 2 to 1. The higher your HDL to lower triglycerides is ideal. Now, obesity, which is definitely a problem here in the US, although other countries are catching up thanks to the standard American diet, is a symptom of insulin resistance and a marker of metabolic syndrome. Now, how do we address all these markers? We pay attention to what we eat. Pay attention to what it's doing to your body. Your waist to height ratio is also a marker of health and obesity. As a general rule of thumb, your waist should be less than half of your height. There's also BMI, which is your body mass index, but some other markers, they may not always be that accurate. Some of these markers are easy to match. Some take lab work, but it's a good idea to get ahead of the curve to ensure a healthy lifestyle. Open up your mind to the reality of cholesterol, diabetes, insulin, and resistance information.